So now that we are into the page builder for our services, we can start playing around with some more cool and fun elements and start adding some new bits to this. So the first thing that I want to do is come down to our get in touch section, because I want to add a parallax effect to the background image that we've added. And of course, we still need to fix this this troublesome button here. So if you remember, the button in this form we could not style, and the reason for that is simply because we've set a gradient as our global button styling. So because we've set that as a gradient, we would need to override that style with another gradient. But of course, from our form here, we're not able to add a gradient. We can only go with a solid color. So just to give you an example of that, let me just come along and drag a normal button. So we have a normal button with our global colors, with our global button colors set. If we actually try to override that, we'll see here as a background type of solid, so classic, it isn't going to work. So that is exactly what we're seeing, but because if we change this to a gradient now, if we just select the same color for the first and second, we are then now able to completely change that. And it's only by selecting the same option, be that a classic or a gradient, we can override that. Now we have the problem with this, whereby we can't actually configure a gradient for this form. So the only way that we're going to be able to change the background of that button is by applying some custom CSS. So if you don't know the CSS coding language, that is not a problem. I'm going to just add this in now so that you know how to do this. So we're going to come along to advanced, and then we're going to come down to custom CSS, and then you just want to type with me here. So we're going to use the Elementor selector option there, because this is going to select the actual element that we are within. And then I happen to know that an Elementor button has a class name of Elementor button, like that. And then we need to open up some curly brackets. And that'll automatically generate a closing curly bracket, because this is where we're going to add in the code to actually change the color. So the code that we want to type in is background, and then we can basically set this to whatever color we want. So if we want it to be white, if we want it to be blue, that wasn't a blue, but we can come along and select any color that we want and then just set that in. So I'm just going to use my color dropper here. So I'm going to just color drop this dark purple to save me going into my globals and selecting the color. And with that selected, I can now just paste that in, and that is going to add in that color. I'm also going to use important like that, because sometimes it doesn't want to apply that CSS unless you put that line of code in. So again, if you're familiar with CSS, this is a very basic piece of CSS just to change that background color using this selector, so that we only apply this to the button. So that is that taken care of. Now all we have to do is come back to the styling and just change the button color there. So the text color, should I say. So I'm going to change this to a white now, and I'm just going to leave it like that. So I've also got or we can see on a hover that is still black. So on hover, I'm going to select the text color here and change that to white as well, so that it looks like that. So I'm happy with that now. So we have this button taken care of. Now we want to add a parallax effect to this background image. So I suggest that you play around with the different settings here, because we can choose how powerful we want this parallax to be. But if you're not familiar with parallax or have never used it before, then you know, it's a really cool way to add some motion to your web page. So if we actually wanted to apply it to the background of this container, of this background, this section, all we have to do is come to this container, come along to layout, and then come down to where you'll see these two options that are applied under the essential add-ons plugin here. So we now have the option to add particles and a parallax. So particles, as the name suggests, would add particles. onto your onto this container. So we can change the different kind of particles to have if we wanted it to be bubbles, snow, default, which adds these little cool little, I don't know what you'd call these, but it looks pretty cool regardless. So you can add particles into containers as a kind of background, just to add again some motion to it. Or we can work with or because we can also use parallax as well as, but we can also enable parallax. So let's just go ahead and turn this on. And what you'll see now is as we scroll, we get that background scroll with us. So we can actually change the speed of that. Now, if you make this a 1, then this isn't going to move at all. So anything above 1 is going to change how fast it moves. So let's maybe try this as a 1.4. If we now select apply changes, we should see that that moves a little bit slower. So let's come back down and we can see that we have a slower speed. So in a nutshell, that is basically what a parallax effect is. And it's a really cool way to, again, add motion to your web pages. So I really like to use parallaxes when they are sitting behind maybe a subscribe box or something like that, where again, it just grabs that reader's attention and hopefully pulls them in to subscribe. So here we're pulling them in and grabbing their attention and trying to get them to get in touch with us. So that is a parallax effect, and you can literally apply that to any container, any background image that you set across your site.